All right, we're good to go. We have two UMIPs for discussion this week. The first one, which I think has more comments around it, is the general token price identifier written by Renus. I had a look at most of the comments. It seemed as if most of the comments were from the real Hexy, who's on the call now. Maybe just as an introduction, Renus, do you want to just give some pretext around what this UMIP is all about? And then the real Hexy, if you could just speak to some of the comments that you that you put on here and wanted just some clarity over.
Yes, so the main motivation why this price identifier was added was to support adding like custom price feed configurations for calling contracts in order to reduce load for UMA voters and also reduce like friction for potential like deployers to set their own custom price feeds, whatever they like. And this UMIP particularly allows first to set it this configuration quite deterministically by the players, but on the other side, it also at least allows some fallback mechanism in case still there is some misconfiguration or some of markets become unavailable or liquid. Then still we have an option for human voters to intervene and resolve the price for particular pair.
Cool. Thank you very much for that. The real Hexy, you added a lot of questions here and suggestions. What do you think would be the best way to go through your comments? Do you want to just run through some of them?
Oh, you're on mute.
I'll just read through them myself and see if there's anything blocking for like 35 minutes.
Renus, can you explain how the fallback works?
The fallback works in a case like where the configuration is not correct or just doesn't work, so that voters have first line of kind of defenses trying to spot any like markets that are like not liquid and not allowing to resolve the price, and in case there are some other markets listed in configuration, then at least voters can fetch prices from that one. Other like fallback mechanisms is already more involved and not that deterministic, because voters have to check other parameters like base currency and quote currency from ancillary data and try to search for most relevant markets and routes themselves. So that we expect to be like a bit more involved process, and there are of course risks that some of voters might not agree on which markets particularly should be resolved to that. So these risks are, sure, there are.
So there's kind of two fallbacks, right? There's like the fallback within the ancillary data, which is like an alternative method, if I'm understanding this correctly. There's like a fallback within ancillary data that's like an alternative method for calculation, and then also like a fallback for if ancillary data is like broken or not set correctly.
Yes, so not normally if everything is configured correctly, but just for example, some particular markets are broken, then and for example, if somebody as fallback has provided CoinGecko as reference, then it should be pretty straightforward for voters to try to resolve the price request based on that. But if it's also not listed there for some particular reason, and voters have to do it manually, try to search for any like available markets. And in case there might be also cases when there is no actual market, because technically nobody like prohibits to launch the contract for a token which is not traded at all, with expectation that upon expiry there might be some liquid market. And in that scenario, if that turns out not to be working, the only like final like resolution that voters can do is either return the fallback value, which if the deployer has set such, or just return 0, because the asset most probably is completely like illiquid, and there's no way to resolve the price request, because like UMA token holders should not be hold the role of like evaluating a liquid asset. Their role should be just to search for markets and track this price on chain, but not being like the evaluator of assets.
Gotcha. So there's also that unresolved parameter that lets a deployer set like a value for the future if like there's no liquid markets.
Yes, so especially if this asset is new and somebody just expects that there should be market, and even the configuration allows to deterministically, for example, set expected Uniswap price pool address once it develops. But just in case if there is no liquidity added and there's no price to track, then at least fixed value can be returned by voters.
Gotcha. Thanks.
Cool. The real Hex, have you had a chance to have a look at your comments?
Blocking comments. I think it's just half the question is for me to get up to speed on all the past decisions made and why they're made, and then half of them are contextual improvements, which I already saw Greenest made 4 commits this morning. I will add if there's anything in the comment section, but I don't see there's anything else.
I think the only open question which seems for me was regarding adding additional like parameters for quote address, but my concern was that that would also like require adding quote chain, and it's not that straightforward as for base currency, because base currency is just a token, but for quote that could be like even in ounces of gold or any like international currency. There's more wider way how to select it, and more factors to consider. So that's the reason why I thought it should be like sufficient to encompass any like additional details in one parameter, whatever it may be, just to reduce the size of number of parameters.
Does it need, like, why was the decision made to restrict it to like base over quote type prices?
The major reason is just to be able to describe any fallback mechanism for voters to resolve, because sure, technically any working price feed configuration could be passed, and it's not theoretically it could also track any like index, or if somebody just develops some new price feed tracking some other real life assets, that's technically all possible, or even some growth rates or some interest rate or volatility indices. But if it's not like quoted in some other currency, then predicting all potential like use cases, I felt like it's still would require separate UMIP for other use cases, because all the fallback mechanisms then would be completely different than rather just searching markets for a given pair and quote currency.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah. Thanks. So
Cool.
is there a restriction on like the component on actually, I guess like vault price feeds wouldn't really apply. Like they could be used, right? They're not excluded for any reason.
Yes, volatility theoretically they could, but particularly
Sorry,
there's no
vault.
Vault. Yeah, sure. Vault or
Yeah.
Vault or any other liquidity providers tokens like Uniswap, like pool tokens or Balancer pool tokens. They're absolutely working. There is additional step for the voters to like unwrap them and see what's the underlying token and price that. But that's also like needed to do manually only in case there is a problem with the price feed configuration. All our current price feed implementations actually allow tracking the price of pool tokens or vaults if one can see what's the underlying like amount per share, and can also add a price identifier for the underlying token.
Gotcha. Sorry to monopolize these questions, but I just have a lot of them.
Sure.
You might address this in the UMIP, but also like in situations where somebody defines a price feed config and it's like defined correctly, where like it could actually run, but say they're using like one market that's like very low volume or something like that, when there's other like more useful markets available, is the recommendation to always go with like what the ancillary data price feed config defines, or would like voters be free to kind of find other markets that are more fitting?
It's quite similar as for other pair price identifiers, where there is like specific instructions given, but in any case voters should like check whether or not the obtained result confirms with like broad market consensus. And normally even if the particular market and configuration is with thin liquidity, but the obtained like result does not like diverge from the other markets, there's no like reason to overcomplicate. So only voters should intervene in case this more illiquid market, which is set in configuration, is creating problems and apparently giving results outside of like broad market consensus.
Gotcha. Makes a lot of sense. I mean, overall, I think this looks great, and it's kind of a revolutionary UMIP.
It's also a bit dangerous, of course, so should be like used with care, and also puts additional like responsibility on both the deployers and other users.
Absolutely.
Most people don't know what's going on with this UMIP, so I think just reading it for the first time, it's like pretty hard to get the whole input right. So I think it takes a couple like hand holding, in my opinion, to be able to get like other users up to speed. So it's dangerous, but also it's because it's hard. Like it's pretty hard to get one set up either.
Agreed.
Cool. Sean, I know you've monopolized some of the questions, but does anyone else have any other questions around or clarification points that we want to ask Rainus about? Funny enough, I did actually have a question, Rainus, but you answered in one
Sure.
of your explanations. No, you'd answered it already, like in your
Oh,
explanation.
cool.
Yeah.
I think actually just to like, I think you're right. Like this is difficult to use, but also I think when we were defining like everything, like all these prices within UMIPs before, there's like this tendency to sometimes overlook like small or small details, which were like sometimes actually breaking, like maybe just referencing a market where and denominating it in like USD instead of like USDT or something like that. Like just small things where like once you actually plugged in the price feed config that was already listed in that UMIP, and it was actually like broken. And so in a way, I would hope that this would actually like have people pay more attention to their initial like definition, because they need to make sure it works rather than just, you know, having this fallback where it's like, oh, we can update the UMIP or like, you know, fall back to like voters' discretion. Yeah. So maybe
I
more
also-
difficult. Sorry.
Sorry, I didn't think you were done. Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say maybe more difficult, but also like hopefully more accurate.
I would say it shifts the responsibilities from one party to another, and I call it out in the comments too. The testing itself would be hard, like figuring out like the custom price feed that it's actually supported. I think there's some scripts to help, but like going through that would be necessary to ensure the contract is successful, right? Before it was UMA's responsibility, review team's responsibility to ensure that it looks right and all. So I could expect maybe in the future people be asking for more tools to help like get this price config and stuff set up. But you know, in the meantime,
That's the price feeders saying right there. I'm just saying.
yeah,
I
sorry.
agree.
No, I was making it carrot.
What kind of tools do you think would be helpful, Hexy?
What that was going to be my suggestion. That any of these generalized one shoe size fits all approach really does need to be supported with well articulated documentation around it on how to use it more than just specifically what the fields mean. And I think that's where UMA's responsibility comes in, where we would write up what people need to look out for, best practices, example cases, so that the ambiguity on how to read this UMIP becomes a lot easier with that.
Definitely. I would say probably like just running the string into proper like into proper, what do you call it, key value pairs, and also like invoke the script we had to check the price config and verify it just works is probably like is going to be one of the first tool I think people would be interested in.
Cool. Just in the I noticed there wasn't too many more questions. I wanted to get a sense of if we're okay with putting this up for a vote this week, or do we think it needs to be pushed? Vote. Unanimous. Rainus,
Except for Rainus.
No, I don't object.
I'm just saying, Rainus, you've done some amazing work on this one. Cool. All right. So no contingencies other than just maybe a few clarifying points on any unresolved comments from Hexy. Is that okay?
Yes.
Cool.
The responses look good.
The other thing is this doesn't like technically work with our proposer bots right now, right? But
yes,
work in
that's
progress.
true. And also voting DApp, I would suspect, needs some additional work for this.
I agree.
Okay. Right. Are we okay with moving on to the next one?
Go.
Cool. All right. Next one, register Polygon derivative factory with the UMIDVM as creator. So I'm not sure if say what dev's on the call today, but it looked like, John, you had most of the comments on this one. It doesn't look like too many comments.
Yeah, it's kind of a core comment though. I saw that they made some updates to the repo links, so I want to check that the code actually works. So my comment was mainly around whether there needed to be changes to the contract in order to access the DVM through the Polygon bridge. So it looks like there were some changes made, which those are kind of like new updates today. So I need to give that a little bit more of a look, and then go to Jarvis with some other questions, I think. And so the core thing with that is that it's not making requests through the optimistic oracle, which kind of obfuscates things a little bit. If you're on Polygon and you go to the optimistic oracle, it looks pretty much the same way as if you were going to the optimistic oracle on mainnet. This would normally access the DVM directly, but it's not able to do that on Polygon. So I need to look at how it's implemented then, since it can't directly go to the DVM.
And what use case did you, from what you can gather, I don't know if anyone knows specifically why they would want to circumvent our bridge?
I don't think it's circumventing the bridge necessarily. I think it's that they have some audited contracts that exist already on mainnet that were built before the optimistic oracle existed. And my understanding at least is that they want to stick as closely to that as possible with the Polygon deployment. I just want to make sure that that actually works and that there aren't any gotchas in there. So I'm going to go to the new contract link that they posted and see what's there. But I don't really have a clear sense yet without reading that of how I feel about it. But I'm going to talk with them and get some more context there.
Okay, so I would then presume this is on hold until we can get more clarity.
I think that makes sense. Sean, what do you think?
Yeah, I think so. But I mean, I think the surface area of changes is going to be very small. I don't know if it was mentioned, but yeah, John mentioned this. This is a contract that we already voted in. So I think if the only changes are where it's interacting with the Oracle child tunnel or whatever it's called, instead of the DVM, and it looks like that's correct, then I think it should be fine.
So
then it's, I would presume it's go contingent on John's thumbs up.
Looks like they also haven't deployed the contracts yet. So the other thing we would need to do is like verify that the deployed contracts match the source code. So it also like depends on when they do that. Rainus, what do you think?
yes, absolutely. These two things are like important before like it could be voted. So both having checked that it's functional and also making sure it's the same source code and it's deployed.
Who is our contact with the Jarvis team?
I am.
Cool. Do you think you'd be able to get this done by Wednesday?
Me?
Yeah. Or like get the information on their if they're going to deploy new contracts and it matches up.
Yeah, I'm like, they know they need to deploy. They probably know better than anybody else by this point, since so we'll just see when they get it done. I've told them that it needs to be deployed before we can vote it in. So we'll try to get it in by tomorrow, or ask them to.
I'm also curious if you know if they've tried deploying on Mumbai and testing it there, or if that's even practical to do.
They have tried deploying on Mumbai and I don't know if they've tested, but I added their contracts as, I registered them as whatever, I guess as create factory contracts on Moonbuy. So I would assume they've tested. Wouldn't the interaction also be the same? Like, I haven't looked at the like child root tunnel yet, but I noticed, or too much yet, but I noticed that there's still like a request price method. So
Yeah, I think it's only the naming of the contract in Finder.
I think so, yeah. So I think we can be
that's good then.
optimistic about it. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think it sounds like it's a go with those contingencies, just double checking again on the deployment and actually getting it deployed, making sure that it's going to work as expected.
Yes.
And I'm going to ask about like any testing that they've done too, just out of curiosity on Mumbai.
Sweet.
Cool. All right. That is this week's set of UMIPs. Any thoughts, comments, or suggestions?
Nope.
Seems like the token price UMIP is going to probably knock out like a few thousand UMIPs in the future. So very condensed, productive meeting, although it was only 2.
Totally agree. All right. Stop the recording.